Hi, thanks for tuning in to our YouTube channel. This is our slide deck of our group51.org October 2011 online meeting. I'm just going to talk to some of the slides. It'll be fairly quick. It was an hour-long meeting that we had, and we covered a couple of different topics. I just switched to the agenda slide here, and I'm going to kind of informally talk to each slide, I guess, for the benefit of people who didn't show up. And unfortunately I don't have time to do 19 takes of this presentation, so you're going to have to bear with my stumbling and bumbling. I'm not a professional speaker, so hopefully this audio and everything turns out on this take, and my apologies if it's gets a little crazy. Anyhow, so again, like I said, this is our agenda. We're going to be touching on an NSA blog that we found through an RSS feed, and talk to the data sheet, I guess, that goes along with the blog. And in our hacking security segment, we're going to discuss a tool called PBNJ. Nifty little thing, easy to set up. And because obviously this isn't our live online meeting, so the round table, actually I'd ask for you to post your comments and questions either in the forum, where we're going to post the YouTube video, or even in our comment area if you happen to run into our YouTube channel through some other means and discover us. So my name is Jeff Green. I live in Ottawa, Canada, and my alias is Taz on the group51.org website. I am the site founder, and basically we're a hacking group that started around 2008. I forget the exact time. We're based in Canada, although we have, members all over the world. But our physical lab that we have, that people connect into, what we call our darknet, is located in Canada. So getting on to the first topic here, the NSA best practices. So Windows over Linux for security. It's kind of a bold statement. So basically what happened was we discovered this blog, actually by what looks to be like a reputable website. Can't say that I've been on there more than basically looking at this article though. And this guy by the name of Ravi Mandalia, I'm not sure how you say his name, so I hope it's not incorrect, but he goes on to say that best practices document released by the U.S. National Security Agency has advised users against using open source operating system platforms like Linux. Well, I read the data sheet. First of all, it wasn't an article, and I couldn't find where they made reference specifically to his statement. So I think it's his own interpretation, and it's kind of dangerous where people make statements like this, and we have people that are thinking of taking the plunge to an open source alternative. It's like, ooh, I don't want to switch to Linux. Then the blog author goes on to say that the NSA failed to highlight security features for OS X within the datasheet, which is clearly not the case, because if you scroll down to the bottom, they provide a link to another datasheet that basically goes into a little bit of detail. But again, these are data sheets. They're not manuals, and it's not a, it's a couple of recommendations. So I think his interpretation is different. So I took a screenshot of the NSA data sheet here, and rather than, as I mentioned to the group members, I don't want to have like a Windows versus Linux debate. That's not the intention here. It's what I thought would be interesting, though, because there's no question that this guy on this blog, either he made these statements to generate discussion, which sometimes blog people do, and we're having this conversation here today, or he just totally misunderstood what the data sheet was about. But so there's no question that that's the case. We're going to dismiss the blog for a moment, but I thought it would be interesting to look at what the NSA actually says in their best practices. And the first 8 points under the host-based recommendations for Windows OS, it would be interesting to see how Linux matches up with those recommendations, if there's alternatives to that, just to see where we're at with the Linux community. So I'm just going to go over like the first 8 points. I'm not going to dissect the whole article, but it'd be interesting here to look at these first 8 points. So they start off by saying migrate to a modern OS and hardware platform. I just highlighted Ubuntu here. This is my favorite Linux distribution. There's many others out there, of course, that you can get 64-bit versions of, and the hardware. Most of my systems I get at PC recycling stores that, it's $50 per computer type of thing. I tend to favor Linux for the servers and whatnot that I build for our darknet and also just in my home in general. Next point, install a comprehensive host-based security suite. Well, of course, those familiar with Linux knows that there's an open source alternative, ClamAV. So there's antivirus software, there's anti-spyware software available, and there's also, of course, firewall and IPSs that are bundled in various packages, but more or less in the Linux world, it's all using the same thing, which is IP tables. But some people, like the argument out there, is, well, yeah, but I want paid support from my antivirus vendor, to ensure the integrity or the quality of the product. So there is Linux solutions there as well, that in a commercial offering such as AVG, Symantec, and McAfee are just three that kind of popped up in my Google window as I searched for them. And actually, I've used Symantec in a Linux environment before. But the question that I asked the group, and I won't spoil it, I'd be curious to hear your comments, is does Linux really need antivirus software? Why or why not? So feel free to comment or reply in the thread in the forum where I post this. Next point, limit the use of the administrator account. So in the Windows world, you have that allow or deny pop-up where it grays out your desktop. I'm referring to Windows 7, where it says you need administrator access to do a certain task, or do you want to allow or deny. So in Linux world, and I've taken a screenshot here of Ubuntu Linux password box where, like for example, if you change your network settings or you do something system related, it's going to prompt for a password. This one here, so the next one is use a web browser with sandboxing capabilities. So I didn't outright see like some software that's available that you can install, and mind you, I didn't look all that much either, confess. But there seems to be plugins available for browsers that produce the same effect as maybe some dedicated antivirus bundles that would offer this type of sandboxing environment. So if you have any recommendations, feel free to comment again at the bottom of the video window. One thing that they didn't mention in the article, and I thought it would be a nice thing to add in there, because really any good security strategy is a defense in depth strategy. It's not, well, with the Tor, for example, you can get a simple plugin right within Firefox, a click of a button, and you're surfing anonymously within the onion routing protocol. And sometimes that may be reliable, or sorry, not reliable. Sometimes there may be a need for that, other times not. But I think it's something that should be a part of an all-encompassing, well, not all-encompassing, what am I saying here? Maybe it should be considered within a security considerations, basically. And I'm sorry, I'm bumbling all over the place here. I'm doing this in one take no matter what, so you're going to have to put up with me. So I apologize. I'm not a professional speaker. Host-based recommendations. Migrate to Microsoft Office 2007 or later is the next point that they mention in the datasheet. So LibreOffice or OpenOffice is an alternative that actually is also available in Windows platform, but is the go-to primary Office suite that's mostly integrated into the Linux distributions, the top ones. If it's not LibreOffice, it's OpenOffice, but it's more or less the same thing. Next up, keep application software up to date. Well, I just took some screenshots here. Again, I'm favoring Ubuntu and showing there's all sorts of options, but the end result is that, more or less you can set up the software application updates automatically, so you don't even have to be conscious of it. Same thing you can do in Windows. And lastly, so their last point in the datasheet is implement full disk encryption, or FDE, on laptops. And this is not to be confused by, do you want to encrypt your home directory on some of the default installation steps when you choose to install from a live distribution, for example, or whatnot. It'll give you an option if you'd like to do that. So this particular option, where you're encrypting the entire hard drive, is not limited to just the /home partition or directory, for that matter, or the user directory is being encrypted. It's the whole disk. And in addition to that, I guess it should also not be confused with the options where some bias, the CMOS options to password protect hard drives. There might be some chips enabled on hard drives to prevent the boot up, where you first turn on a system, it'll prompt you for a password. That's something different, and I have limited knowledge of that, but from what my understanding is that particular solution is not really a great one, in that it doesn't really encrypt the whole drive. It basically just disables the booting of the hard drive, and there's various workarounds for that you can search on Google, and basically kind of similar but different to the effect of taking the battery off your CMOS, on your motherboard if it was password protected. It's not the same, but it's the same kind of idea. So there's a workaround for that, where again, full disk encryption, you're actually encrypting the whole drive, basically, as you see in the bottom window that I have here, /dev SDA2. And that basically sums up the review, or the comparison between the NSA recommendations for Windows. So I thought it was interesting. And Linux now today is fairly comparable, and I think, in my opinion, in some areas better than Windows. Each platform has their pluses and minuses and different purposes, but when it comes down to security and whatnot, I tend to favor Linux myself, but feel free to comment on that. Moving on to the hacking tool segment is PBNJ. So what's on your network? Now, for those of you that may already know what this is, and maybe would begin or make a comment that, well, yeah, this is basically glorified nmap. Well, yes and no. I mean, it uses nmap to scan your network, but the way that it keeps track of the changes on your network, like with a simple installation, it's a pretty handy utility. So here's the definition I pulled from their website, and also this is where you can get a copy of the software. The installation, though, most Linux distributions, the repositories within the distribution will contain the link to install it through the package manager, whether it's yum or apt-get type of thing. So what can it do for me? Well, here's a list of, again, what they say what it can do, but I'm going to demonstrate a really basic use for it that I find personally very useful, that hopefully you will too. So again, just backtracking a little bit. So the installation could be as simple as this. If you're on Ubuntu and want to install this, and within 10 seconds it takes to download and auto install, you'll have this up and running. So I'm going to break it up here. This is not the end result of what I wanted to show you, but I'm leading up to it. For those of you that never seen the tool before, I just want to explain a couple of things so that well, you'll see where I'm going with this. So like I say in this slide here, stick with me. So if you look up at the top, I've run the command, and in the boxes are the outputs of the command. So here I've ran sudo Scan PBNJ is the actual name of the binary that you run at the command line. And here I'm scanning the local host. So when you scan it, when you run it against the local host, it's basically, well, it will insert the machine as a host within its in the database, and it will also insert all the running services on the host. And in the second box, just highlighting that, I disabled my domain name server or services. And so port 53 and 953 are linked to this particular service. And so when I ran it again, it noticed, whoa, okay, the service is down. So it's interesting, and for me, I'm not a coder, or I don't, I'm not an expert, script creator, I guess you can say. I'm the way my mind thinks is sort of like a mega blocks, like one block at a time, so that I can understand things. And my script that I'm about to show you is going to kind of reveal that. But where I'm going with this here is that we're looking at the standard output of what this command does, and considering on the output, we can create a script to generate some alerts for us. So here in the first box, here's an example of my script where the end result is it's just going to output the lines. Like if there's a down service, it's just going to echo what went down, basically. And in the second box, that's exactly what happened. Now let's say, now getting a little closer to really what I wanted to show you how I use this tool from time to time, is we can redirect it. Instead of standard out, we can throw it into an email, and we'd want to be alerted. And what's interesting about this is that it's not like a one-time snapshot of what's on your network. Well, as you can see here, I give an example of my cron entry, cron tab. I'm running it every 5 minutes. So when you're scanning on the network, it's important that like there's you go off to work throughout the day, and maybe if you have a wireless router at home, you want to check out things, or if you're like me, you have a bazillion gadgets all over the place that as you're going to see here in a minute, the Boxy network device media center that I have, but iPods, iPhones, or anything that connects to, even Kindles, for example, can connect to your Wi-Fi, and you want to know, up and down. You have some friends over, connect to your network. You maybe entered them in one time if you're using, wireless encryption of some kind. So you can keep track of that, and more particularly too, if you have a firewall, you can also test your firewall on rule access as well, like in that, well, okay, I shouldn't, all these services should be going down for a particular host at X amount of time when my firewall rule kicks in. And again, there's a million ways to skin the cat here. This is just one example with this particular tool. So moving on, so we identified here where we can create this cron tab and send us an alert. So we're going to take it one step further now. We're almost getting to the point where what I really wanted to explain to you guys. So we're scanning our entire subnet. So in this particular use, or my use, what I'm trying to get my point across here, is I'm more interested in hosts coming up and down, especially when a segment of my network is dedicated to darknet activity, publicly or public access and whatnot. I want a little more. I want an idea of what's going on in the network and whatnot. So I run this utility on any given subnet, and it'll give me a 5-minute snapshot or interval. But let me rephrase that though. That the fact that this tool is running every 5 minutes, the way that my script is set up is that it'll only email me when there's a difference. And we'll see a little more of that in a couple slides ahead, more specifically on how I do that. So here's an example like of an output where, so I'm running it for the first time. It discovered a machine. The key thing here, what we're looking at, is inserting machine. Yes, your service is detected on it, but now let's just say that this is a machine I didn't expect. And yes, you can go and look at your DHCP logs and a bazillion other things as well, but again, with this tool, it's kind of neat and an incredibly easy way to set up email alerts, without setting up Nagios or Nessus or, maybe you still want to install those for different reasons, but again, this is a one-liner. So in running this utility, I was actually surprised. And I bought one of these little boxy boxes, and it's running. Well, the interface reminds me a little bit of Mythbuntu, which is kind of, like a media center TV type system. And it is a Linux distribution actually that's on the box, packaged in the small form factor, and it actually looks like this, but it's kind of like a chopped off box. But there's wired Ethernet on it, there's wireless, and a whole bunch of different things. But what was interesting is when I ran my scan, just seeing what was out there and thought I'd give this utility a try, I noticed that port 8800 and I focused on 8800 first because I saw that it was an HTTP server. It was interesting. Like, I knew that this Boxy had a web server front end. I fully expected that. And I see here, like at 8080, that's basically the front end where typical users would go on. And you'd see 8080 in the manual, that you connect to. But 8800 is not documented anywhere. So I took my browser, went to it, and it seemed to be like a maintenance type thing where for you log in via maintenance and you can update firmware and whatnot, and that's a pretty big security risk in itself, having such a port open. And you figure, okay, well, you're behind a NAT and maybe a whole bunch of firewalls, whatnot. Okay, so what's the deal? Like, the outside world is not going to connect to it. Certainly, you're concerned then when you would say that if you have like a whole bunch of users like within an office environment and you're trying to protect certain resources, okay, maybe that's a concern. However, so I dug a little deeper and I looked at my firewall logs and whatnot, and it's initiating sessions reaching out to the internet, and basically because my firewalls are stateful packet filtering, and well, I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, and that's not what this presentation is about, but long story short is that there's a link open because the traffic is being initiated, like basically a call home from the Boxy box going out. So then whatever's on the other side can go through my firewall, through NAT, through all that stuff, and have direct access to this box. And depending on what is enabled by default, or for that matter what's exploitable, you drop to a shell and you have a functional, great little nifty Linux box that's located within a subnet of someone's home network. That's not necessarily a good thing. And I won't even go any further because I know for the sake of time here I need to wrap up. But look at the other ports, 9090, 9091, port 5000, and so I'm still watching traffic on that, and I see some BitTorrent activity, and I know I'm not doing any BitTorrent stuff. It's kind of bizarre. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to hear your feedback if anybody has these boxes or something similar. And actually, just on another little side note, you can actually download the ISO for the Boxy software and run it on a normal PC. Just give you an idea of the openness of the platform. So it's not to say that somebody couldn't discover an exploit. Anyhow, I'd be curious to hear your feedback and if anybody else had similar observations. And So we're on the last couple of slides for PBNJ. I just wanted to point out that the default, if you don't specify the port range, it's just the privileged ports that it's going to scan, which in a way, I mean, if you're going to scan anything, the privileged ports are the ones you want to hit first, because typically anything running under 1025 is going to be probably running as root unless your system is set up differently. And of course, if services are running as root and it's exploited with buffer overflow or anything like that, and they dropped his shell, game over in terms of controlling access on the box. And the last slide for PBNJ. So here's my PBNJ script.sh. Again, the disclaimer here, I'm not an expert bash script creator, so I'm sure somebody out there has like a one-liner to replace everything that I have, but for somebody that's never seen bash before, probably my Lego type building block here might be helpful, I guess, in that. So here, like we see, just breaking it apart. Enter your subnet of our home network, or of your home network. So the subnet being, like in the example here, I have 192.168.1 dot, and then with the 24-bit mask. So here, generate the scan data to grep. So I chose to basically put the scan data, do one scan, and call to it twice, basically to a temp file. One thing, actually, now that I think of it, I don't delete although like I'm overwriting, maybe it might be good practice to delete the temp file after the scan is done, but I am writing to root, and this script is being run in the root cron tab, so normal user access would not be there. But anyhow, that's however you want to handle that. Then going to the next one, so look for downed host services. So basically I'm just showing the like, is anything down, send an alert. And then with the next one, if looking for like an inserted keyword. So inserted means that it found something and it inserted to the database. You want to be alerted of that new device and get an email. And this is the area where we have our round table, and I can tell you that we had an excellent conversation. One of our Group 51 members went to DerbyCon, and we talked about 15 minutes for that, and he had the benefit of sitting down with Kevin Mitnick, passing locks back and forth, and having a grand time, I'm sure, and really disappointed I couldn't be there to join him. That's Kevin Mitnick is probably one of the people on my list that I would love to see before I die. So it would be certainly interesting. I'm going to try next year to make it. But anyhow, all that to say, you might want to try and come on to our online meetings where it's full audio and it's kind of informal, really, and we just talk about the slides, and people, for the most part, just posts in chat. We have a chat window, or optionally, if you want to talk in the meeting, it's a conference type thing, voice over IP, loaded in a browser. It's Bankle is the application that we're using right now. It seemed to work good for our first presentation, but anyhow, and we're always looking for people to contribute. If you want to talk about anything, ethical hacking or whatnot, my presentations tend to be pretty light and don't go into too much detail. So I'm looking for some people that can really drill down. Maybe have a meeting one month where we basically talk about either a programming language, C++, assembler, that sort of thing. Sky's the limit. But anyhow, thanks for putting up with me and my stumbling and bumbling. If I didn't publish this now, it would never go online. Maybe that's a good thing, but thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I will get better on the next one. Okay, take care.